In the opulent mansion, Nora, blinded by ambition, subjected her mother-in-law, who was completely blind, to the ultimate humiliation, using her as a living table support at her parties for wealthy friends who reveled in the grotesque scene. Nora's shrill laughter echoed through the sumptuous living room, mingling with the clinking of crystal glasses and the animated chatter of her friends. The atmosphere was one of unrestrained opulence, with chandeliers hanging like diamond waterfalls and Persian tapestries covering the floor. At the center of all this ostentation, the Sheik's mother, the venerable blind matriarch, remained motionless. A richly embroidered brocade fabric covered her body from the waist down, transforming her into a kind of makeshift coffee table. On the fabric, silver trays gleamed with delicate canapés and champagne flutes. "Ah, my dears, isn't this a brilliant idea?" Nora gestured with the hand holding a glass, her rings sparkling. "My living art piece is so versatile and so silent. Isn't that right, darling?" She leaned in slightly, a cruel smile on her lips, but the matriarch didn't respond, her opaque eyes fixed on an invisible point. Nora's friends, women equally shallow and dazzled by their hostess's power and money, laughed and made jocular comments, some even leaning over to pick a snack directly from the table. Outside, the wind howled, whipping the palm trees and making the mansion windows rattle. The storm, which had intensified abruptly, had forced the cancellation of all flights, including the Sheik's. Frustrated but resigned, he had ordered his driver to take him back home, anticipating a quiet evening of reading and reflection. Upon entering the mansion, the Sheik was met by an unusual silence in the entrance hall, contrasting with the noise coming from the living room. He frowned. Nora knew he disliked noisy parties without his consent. He followed the sound, curiosity mixed with a pang of irritation. The scene that unfolded before his eyes struck him like lightning. The room was filled with laughing women, and in the center, his mother. His mother, the woman who had raised him with love and wisdom, to whom he devoted unconditional respect and affection, was there, covered by a cloth being used as furniture. The Sheik's eyes, accustomed to seeing beauty and dignity in everything, could barely process the abomination. Nora's smile froze on her lips as she saw him standing at the entrance, the Sheik's imposing figure filling the doorway. The air in the room seemed to thin. The laughter died. A sepulchral silence fell upon the guests, who now looked at the Sheik with a mixture of fear and embarrassment. "Sheik, oh darling, you're back." Nora tried to force a smile, her voice a little high-pitched. "Was the flight cancelled? What a shame. We were just having a little fun." The Sheik didn't respond. His dark eyes, usually calm and thoughtful, burned with a contained fury that made Nora take a step back. He advanced slowly, each step measured towards the center of the room. His eyes were fixed on the motionless figure of his mother. "What is this, Nora?" His voice was a dangerous whisper, more terrifying than any shout. Nora tried to stammer an explanation, but the words died in her throat. The Sheik reached out and, with a swift, decisive movement, tore off the brocade fabric covering his mother. The revelation was shocking. The old woman, though blind, seemed shrunken, her shoulders hunched, her delicate hands resting in her lap, an expression of resignation and deep sadness marking her once serene face. Small food crumbs and a few drops of champagne stained her simple tunic. A groan escaped the Sheik's lips. He knelt beside his mother, brushing away the crumbs with a trembling hand, his heart gripped by a searing pain and overwhelming rage. "Mother! Oh, my mother!" He rose, turning to face Nora. His eyes were flames. You dared to do this to my mother? To the woman who gave me life, who taught me honor and respect?" Nora paled, her face contorted with terror. "Sheik, I can explain. She doesn't care. She can't even see." "Can't see?" The Sheik laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "But she feels, Nora. She feels the humiliation, the cruelty. and I see, and I feel." He pointed to the silver trays still full of snacks. "Take those." Nora hesitated. "What?" "Take the trays," he repeated, his voice an unquestionable command. "And serve. Serve her." He pointed to his mother, who was now being helped by one of the maids, who had discreetly entered to stand up and sit on a nearby sofa. "Serve your own mother, Nora. Eat whatever she wants, drink whatever she asks for, and don't you dare stop until I say so." Nora's face contorted in a mixture of disbelief and horror. Her friends, shocked, began to rise, murmuring apologies and heading for the exit. The Sheik ignored them. His eyes were fixed on Nora, who was visibly trembling. "You wanted a spectacle, Nora. Very well. The show has just begun, and you will be the main star." He watched her pick up with trembling hands one of the trays. Nora's reign of cruelty had come to an end, and the terror in her eyes was the bitterest proof. Nora held the silver tray, the canapes and champagne flutes, seeming to weigh tons in her trembling hands. Her eyes, once full of arrogance, now reflected a growing panic. She looked at the Sheik, then at her own mother, who was sitting on the sofa, still visibly shaken by the previous scene, but now being comforted by one of the maids. "Sheik, please, this is ridiculous. I won't do it." Nora's voice was a thread, tinged with desperation. The Sheik took a step forward, his imposing presence filling the space. "You will, Nora. Or would you prefer I call the press and show the world how the Sheik's wife treats her own mother? How she uses a blind woman as furniture? The choice is yours." The threat hit Nora like a blow. Public humiliation was something she, with her obsession for status and image, could not bear. Her lips trembled. She cast a hateful glance at her mother, who seemed oblivious to the exchange of words, her opaque eyes fixed on nothing. "Now," the Sheik continued, his voice cold and cutting, "start with your mother. She must be hungry after such an eventful night." He gestured towards the blind matriarch, who was now drinking a glass of water offered by the maid. Nora turned, her shoulders hunched, and walked towards the sofa where her mother was. Each step was torture, an acknowledgement of her downfall. The last friends, still lingering at the door, silent witnesses to the scene, hurried out, leaving behind only the Sheik, Nora, her mother, the maid, and the blind matriarch. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the clinking of silver in Nora's hands. "Mother," she began, her voice almost inaudible, extending the tray. Nora's mother, a woman with a tired countenance and watery eyes, looked at the tray with confusion. "Nora, what are you doing, my daughter?" "She is serving you, mother." The Sheik's voice echoed, devoid of emotion. "As you served my mother." The blind matriarch, sitting nearby, seemed to pick up on the tension in the air. Her thin lips curved slightly, an expression of sadness and understanding on her face. Nora picked up a smoked salmon canapé and offered it to her mother. Her hands trembled so much that the small snack almost fell. Nora's mother hesitated, looking at her daughter's pale, contorted face. I'm not hungry, dear." "Eat," the Sheik commanded, his voice like thunder. "She will serve you until you are satisfied. And don't you dare refuse." Nora's mother, startled by the Sheik's tone, took the canapé. Her eyes met Nora's for a brief instant, and the old woman saw there not the spoiled and cruel daughter she knew, but a broken woman, on the verge of tears. The irony was brutal. "And now, a drink," the Sheik instructed, pointing to the champagne flutes. "Serve your mother with the same diligence you expected from mine." Nora, her eyes burning with humiliation, picked up a flute and offered it to her mother. The champagne bubbled, a bitter reminder of the laughter and ostentation from minutes ago. Her mother took a sip, observing her daughter with a mixture of pity and astonishment. The sheikh watched Nora's every move, his eyes dark as coal, without showing any sign of satisfaction or regret. He wanted her to feel every ounce of the pain and humiliation she had inflicted upon his own mother. The terror in Nora's eyes was palpable, and she knew this was just the beginning of her penance. The reign of cruelty had ended, and the crown of thorns was now hers. "One more," the sheikh commanded without averting his gaze, "and make sure she is comfortable. Ask if she needs anything else. Don't forget the details, Nora. Hospitality is an art." Nora felt tears welling in her eyes, but she swallowed them. The idea of having to ask her mother, the woman she had always despised and ignored, if she needed anything, was exquisite torture. "Mother, do you wish for anything else?" Nora's voice was a hoarse whisper, almost inaudible. Nora's mother slowly shook her head. "No, my daughter, I'm fine, thank you." There was a melancholic sweetness in her voice that made Nora feel a shiver of guilt, a feeling she rarely allowed herself. The sheikh, however, was not satisfied. "Fine is not enough, Nora," he declared, his voice grave and unyielding, echoing through the oppressive silence of the room. "My mother was not fine when you used her as an inanimate object. Your mother deserves more than an 'I'm fine.' She deserves comfort, attention. Ask her about her day. Ask if she's tired, if the cushion is in the correct position, if she needs a blanket." The order hit Nora like an electric shock. It was exquisite torture, forcing her into an intimacy and care she had always denied her own mother. Her face contorted in contained fury and despair. "Unnecessary." Idun, the sheikh, took a slow step towards her, and Nora instinctively recoiled, feeling the weight of his imposing presence. "Unnecessary was what you did. Now do as I commanded, and do it with the dignity you denied my mother." With her hands still trembling, Nora turned to her mother. The blind woman, sitting on the sofa, seemed a fragile and defenseless figure. Oblivious to the depth of her daughter's humiliation, the discreet maid had stepped back a little, but her eyes were fixed on the scene, a mixture of pity and relief on her face. "Mother," Nora began again, her voice almost a lament. Are you comfortable? The cushion. Is it all right?" She reached out, hesitantly, to adjust the cushion behind her mother's back. Her fingers brushed the fabric, and she felt a shiver. It was the first time in years she had touched her mother with an intention other than dismissal or contempt. Nora's mother, surprised by the question and the touch, nodded slowly. "Yes, dear. It's fine. Do you want a blanket? Is it cold?" Nora continued, following the sheikh's instructions, each word a stab at her pride. "No, there's no need, my daughter. I'm quite warm." The sheikh watched everything, his eyes like sharp blades. He was not satisfied. "Nora, you're not listening. Your mother is blind. She can't see if you're being sincere. She needs to feel. She needs your voice, your attention. Tell her about what happened today. Ask her what she would like to do tomorrow. Make her feel valued." The cruelty of the order was evident. Nora had always treated her mother with neglect and coldness. Now she was forced to feign affection and interest, to rebuild a connection she herself had destroyed. The tears she tried to suppress finally streamed down her cheeks. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, feeling even more humiliated. "Mother," she began, her voice breaking, I'm so sorry for everything." The words came out almost instinctively, an unexpected confession under the pressure of the moment, a glimpse of long-buried guilt. Nora's mother widened her eyes, or what remained of them, towards her daughter's voice. "What, Nora? What are you saying?" The blind matriarch, the sheikh's mother, who was sitting nearby, moved slightly, as if sensing the depth of that moment. A faint, almost imperceptible smile curved her lips. An expression of silent triumph and justice finally served. The Sheik, however, did not soften his expression. "It's not enough, Nora. Regret is not service. You need to act. You need to care for her. You need to be the daughter she deserves, and that you never were." He then gestured to the maid. "You, please, escort my mother to her chambers. She needs to rest." The maid nodded and gently helped the blind matriarch to her feet. Before leaving, the blind matriarch turned her head towards Nora, and her opaque eyes seemed to pierce Nora's soul, laden with a depth of knowledge. When they left, the Sheik turned to Nora, his voice now an icy whisper that was more menacing than any shout. "Now, Nora, you will take your mother to her room. You will help her undress, prepare for sleep, and you will read to her until she falls asleep. And tomorrow you will wake early and prepare her breakfast, and every day from now on you will be your own mother's personal servant, until I decide you have learned your lesson." Shock paralyzed Nora. Undress her mother, read to her, prepare breakfast. This was a nightmare, a punishment that went beyond her darkest imagination. "No, I can't do this. I am the Sheik's wife. I am not a nurse," she shrieked, her voice hysterical, panic seizing every fiber of her being. The Sheik approached her, his eyes flashing with contained fury. "You are what I say you are, Nora. And at this moment, you are your mother's servant. And if you refuse, I promise your humiliation will be far worse than you can imagine. You will have the press, the tabloids, and the entire world laughing at you. The choice is yours." Nora looked at her mother, who seemed confused and frightened by the outburst. The old woman extended a trembling hand into the air, as if searching for something, for a comfort Nora had never offered. Nora felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The reign of cruelty had come to an end, and the penance, she realized with icy terror, was just beginning. She had no choice. She was trapped. The crown of thorns was firmly embedded in her head, and its weight was unbearable. With a sigh that seemed to tear her soul, Nora turned to her mother. "Mother, come, I'll take you to your room." Her voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. Nora's mother, still a little dazed, nodded slowly and rose with difficulty. Nora, reluctant, extended her arm to support her mother, feeling the fragility of the bones beneath the thin skin. It was a touch she had avoided for years, a contact that was now forced, intimate, and humiliating. Every step to her mother's room was torture. The corridor, once a symbol of her dominion in the mansion, now seemed a corridor of penance. As they entered her mother's modest room, Nora felt a shiver. It was a simple, almost Spartan room, in stark contrast to the ostentatious luxury she enjoyed. The bed was made, a small dresser and an armchair comprised the furniture. "Sit here, Mother," Nora murmured, guiding her mother to the edge of the bed. The old woman obeyed, her unfocused eyes fixed on a distant point. Nora hesitated, the next part of the Sheik's order echoing in her mind. "Help her undress." The thought made her shudder. She had never done this, not even as a child. With trembling hands, Nora began to unbutton her mother's simple dress. Her fingers were clumsy, and Nora's mother, sensing her daughter's hesitation, tried to help, but her movements were slow and uncertain. "Nora, what's happening, my daughter? Why is the Sheik so angry?" The question hit Nora like a knife. She couldn't answer. She couldn't admit the truth, the cruelty that had led her to this point. "It's nothing, Mother. He just wants you to be well cared for," she lied, her voice heavy with bitterness. Finally, the dress was removed, and Nora helped her mother into a clean nightgown. Every touch was a reminder of her new reality, of her downfall. She helped her lie down, adjusting the pillows with forced delicacy. "Now, I'm going to read to you," Nora said, her voice a little firmer, but still with a noticeable tremor. She searched the small bookshelf beside the bed and found a book of old tales with yellowed pages. She opened it randomly and began to read, the words feeling strange in her mouth. So accustomed to giving orders and not to serving, Nora's voice, initially hesitant, began to flow, filling the silence of the room. Nora's mother, lying down, seemed to relax a little, the sound of her daughter's voice an unexpected melody. The old woman's opaque eyes were closed, and a solitary tear rolled down her temple, perhaps from confusion, perhaps from a strange and belated joy. Nora read for what felt like an eternity, until her mother's breathing became regular and deep. She was asleep. Nora closed the book, the weight of reality falling upon her again. Tomorrow she would wake early, she would prepare breakfast, and every day from now on she would be her own mother's servant. The Sheik had kept his promise. He had broken her, and he would rebuild her in his own image of justice. Nora rose from the chair, her body heavy, her mind in a turmoil. Her mother's bedroom door seemed a portal to an uncertain and grim future. She was the dethroned queen, and her crown of thorns was just beginning to pierce her flesh. Icy terror settled in her heart. The penance had indeed begun. Nora dragged herself out of her mother's modest room, closing the door with a care she never imagined she possessed. The corridor, once a stage for her triumphant entrances, now seemed a dark tunnel leading her to an abyss. Each step echoed the sound of her humiliation. The mansion, once her kingdom, now felt like a gilded cage, and she, the dethroned queen, was being forced to serve. The Sheik was not in sight, but his presence was palpable, like an omnipresent shadow watching her every move. Nora felt his eyes on her back, even if he wasn't there. Rage simmered within her, mixed with a paralyzing fear. How could he do this? How could he transform her from mistress of the house into a servant? And for her own mother, whom she had despised and exploited for so long. She reached her own room, a sanctuary of luxury and opulence. The full-length mirror reflected her image, the crumpled silk dress, disheveled hair, eyes swollen from repressed tears. She looked like a ghost of herself. The powerful and impeccable woman she strove to be had vanished. In her place, there was a fragile figure, on the verge of collapse. Nora threw herself onto the soft bed, but comfort eluded her. Her mind spun in a whirlwind of thoughts. The Sheik's voice, icy and relentless, repeated in her head. "You will be your own mother's personal servant until I decide you have learned your lesson." The lesson. What lesson? That she was cruel, that she had disrespected her mother. She had always known this, but had never cared. Now, indifference transformed into daily torture. The night was long and sleepless. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's blind face. The trembling hand extended, the solitary tear, and then the Sheik's face, with his blade-like eyes promising even greater humiliation. The dread of dawn was almost unbearable. When the first rays of sun peeked through the heavy curtains, Nora felt a chill. It was time, the breakfast penance. She rose, her body heavy, every muscle protesting. She dressed in a simple robe, avoiding the mirror's gaze. There was no makeup, no jewelry, no armor of her vanity, just her, naked in her vulnerability. The kitchen, a place she rarely visited, seemed a labyrinth of unfamiliar utensils and aromas. The maids, who once served her with reverence, now watched her with a mixture of curiosity and, Nora imagined, satisfaction. Their gazes were like pinpricks, each one reminding her of her new position. "Good morning, Madam Nora," said one of the cooks, her voice strangely formal. "What would Madam like to prepare?" Nora felt her face burn again. I will prepare my mother's breakfast," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. The cook nodded, expressionless. "How may I assist you?" "Nothing. I'll do it myself," Nora retorted, her pride wounded. She took eggs, bread, fruit. Her hands, accustomed to holding champagne flutes and expensive jewelry, were clumsy with the frying pan and toaster. The smell of burnt eggs filled the kitchen for a moment, and Nora felt a wave of despair. She was useless, completely useless for the most basic tasks. Finally, with the reluctant and silent help of the maids, she managed to assemble a tray. A cup of tea, toast, scrambled eggs, and a few slices of melon. It was not the feast she usually enjoyed, but it was the best she could do. With the tray in hand, Nora walked back to her mother's room. Each step was an act of internal resistance. She opened the door and found her mother sitting on the bed, her opaque eyes fixed on the wall. "Good morning, Mother," Nora said, her voice still hoarse, but with a tone she tried to infuse with false sweetness. Nora's mother turned her head towards the voice. "Nora, is that you, my daughter? I thought I heard noise in the kitchen." "Yes, it's me. I brought your breakfast," Nora replied, placing the tray on the small bedside table. You prepared it for me." The surprise in her mother's voice was palpable. Nora nodded, forgetting for a moment that her mother couldn't see her. "Yes, I prepared it." Her mother extended a trembling hand, searching for the tray. Nora guided it, feeling the light, hesitant touch. "Thank you, my daughter," her mother said, and Nora swore she heard genuine emotion in her voice, an emotion she didn't deserve. Nora watched her mother eat slowly, each mouthful a reminder of her new role. The Sheik had succeeded. He had not only humiliated her, but forced her to confront the extent of her own cruelty and the uselessness of her existence, without the power and money that protected her. The crown of thorns was tightening, and the day had barely begun. Nora remained there, watching her mother finish breakfast. Every movement of the old woman, every sip of tea, was a vivid reminder of her new and humiliating reality. Her mother, with a serenity Nora had never noticed before, seemed to savor every bite, a stark contrast to the haste and indifference with which Nora usually treated her own meals. "It's delicious, my daughter," her mother murmured, a faint smile on her wrinkled lips. "Thank you." The word "thank you" sounded strange to Nora's ears, almost like a silent accusation. She had never received sincere thanks from her mother, for she had never done anything to deserve it. A knot formed in her throat, and a pang of something she didn't want to acknowledge, perhaps guilt, perhaps shame, struck her. She merely nodded, unable to formulate a response. When her mother finished, Nora picked up the tray, feeling the weight of the empty dishes, like the weight of her own guilt. "Do you need anything else, Mother?" Perhaps I could tidy myself up a bit. I feel a little disheveled," her mother replied, running her hand through her thin hair. Nora swallowed hard. "Tidy up, Mother." Another intimate task, another humiliation the Sheik had orchestrated. She set the tray aside and approached her mother. With hesitant hands, she picked up a hairbrush from the dresser and began to comb her mother's grey hair. It was a simple act, but for Nora, it felt monumental. Her fingers, accustomed to handling jewels and fine fabrics, now moved with forced delicacy, carefully untangling the knots. The soft scent of lavender from her mother's hair, an aroma she had ignored for years, now filled the air. Nora's mother sighed, a sound of pure contentment. "That's good, my daughter. Very good. It's been so long since anyone combed my hair." The last sentence was spoken with a subtle melancholy that pierced Nora's hardened heart. As she combed her mother's hair, Nora felt a chill. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. She looked up and, for an instant, saw a tall, imposing silhouette passing down the corridor. It was the Sheik. He didn't stop, didn't look directly at her, but Nora felt the weight of his invisible gaze, the confirmation that he was observing, evaluating her performance. The icy terror intensified. He was there, a constant shadow, ensuring she fulfilled her penance, enjoying her downfall. Rage simmered again, mixed with a growing despair. How could she bear this? With every minute, every touch, every word from her mother, the armor Nora had built over the years was crumbling, revealing the fragile and empty woman beneath. She was the dethroned queen, forced to serve, and the Sheik was the silent yet relentless executioner. "Nora, are you all right?" her mother asked, feeling the tension in her daughter's hand. Nora forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, mother. I'm fine." The lie was bitter in her mouth, and she wondered how long she could maintain it. After helping her mother dress in a simple, comfortable gown, Nora guided her out of the room. "I would like some fresh air, if it's not too much trouble, my daughter," her mother asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Nora hesitated. The garden, where she used to entertain her friends, display her jewels and her power. Now she would be there as a servant, under the curious and, she imagined, satisfied gazes of the staff, but she had no choice. "Of course, mother. Let's go to the garden." With her mother's hand firmly resting on her arm, Nora led her through the luxurious corridors, passing maids who lowered their eyes or watched her with ill-concealed curiosity. Their gazes were like pinpricks, each one reminding her of her new position, of her downfall. As they reached the garden, the morning sun bathed the flowers in vibrant colors. The air was fresh and fragrant. Nora guided her mother to a marble bench in the shade of a date palm, a spot her mother had never visited before, despite living in the mansion for years. "Sit here, mother," Nora said, helping her to sit. Nora's mother extended her hands, feeling the warmth of the sun and the gentle breeze. "It's so beautiful here. I had forgotten what the garden was like. Thank you, Nora." Nora felt a tightening in her chest. Forgotten. Because Nora had never taken her there, never cared to share the mansion's beauty with her own mother. The gratitude in her mother's voice was a heavy burden, a constant reminder of her own neglect. Nora sat beside her mother, maintaining a respectful distance. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the sounds of the birds, the rustle of the wind in the leaves. Her mother seemed at peace, her eyes closed, absorbing the surroundings. Nora, on the other hand, was in torment. Her mind was a whirlwind of resentment, humiliation, and a growing fear of what the future held. The morning dragged on. Nora read her mother a passage from the Book of Tales, talked about the flowers her mother couldn't see, described the singing birds. Every word was an effort, every act of service, a stab at her pride. She was the dethroned queen, and her crown of thorns was tightening with each passing moment, digging deeper into her flesh. The Sheik did not reappear, but his presence was an invisible force that hung over the mansion, over Nora. She knew he was watching, waiting, judging. The day had barely begun, and the eternity of her punishment stretched before her, relentless and endless. Morning slowly gave way to afternoon. The sun climbed higher, casting sharper shadows and intensifying the heat. Nora continued her forced performance in the garden, her voice growing hoarse from so much reading and describing. Her mother, oblivious to the internal storm raging within her daughter, seemed to blossom under the attention. She smiled more, asked gentle questions, and even hummed a soft melody, a sound Nora hadn't heard in years. Every moment of her mother's contentment was a fresh stab for Nora, a reminder of the years of neglect she had inflicted. "My daughter, I'm a little thirsty," her mother asked, her voice soft. Nora rose reluctantly. "Of course, mother. I'll fetch you something to drink." She walked back to the mansion, feeling the weight of the sun on her head and the weight of her humiliation in her soul. As she passed through the glass door leading to the main hall, her eyes met the Sheik's. He stood, imposing, near the grand marble fireplace, a cup of tea in his hand. His eyes, dark and impenetrable, expressed nothing but a cold expectation, almost a silent challenge. He didn't say a word, merely watched her pass, and Nora felt an icy shiver run down her spine. It was a silent yet powerful reminder that he was always there, a relentless judge, and that her every move was being scrutinized. She handed the drinks to her mother, who accepted them with a grateful smile. "Thank you, dear. You are so thoughtful today." The word thoughtful sounded like a cruel irony. Nora merely nodded, unable to respond. When the mansion's tower clock struck noon, Nora's mother said, "I think I'm a little hungry, my daughter. What will we have for lunch?" Nora felt a knot in her stomach. Another meal, another test of her incompetence. I'll see what I can prepare, Mother." Back in the kitchen, the scene was one of frantic activity. The smell of garlic and herbs hung in the air. The head cook, a corpulent woman with a stern gaze and strong arms, watched her. "Does Madame Nora wish to prepare her mother's lunch?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion, but with a tone Nora interpreted as a hint of mockery. "Yes, I will. We have roasted chicken, rice, and steamed vegetables. Would Madame like to assemble a plate?" Nora took a plate and with trembling, clumsy hands began to serve. The chicken seemed to slip from the spoon, the rice spilled onto the edge of the plate, and the vegetables seemed to refuse to stay put. She tried with all her concentration, but the result was a disordered mountain of food. She felt the gazes of the other maids upon her, ill-concealed, some with curiosity, others with contained satisfaction. The humiliation was unbearable. Finally, she managed to assemble a reasonable plate and a small salad, which looked more like a pile of leaves than a culinary work of art. "Do you need help carrying the tray?" the cook asked, her voice now with a tone of false concern. "No, I can manage," Nora replied, her voice a little louder than intended. She picked up the tray, feeling the warmth of the dishes through the cloth. She walked back to the garden, each step a battle against wounded pride and exhaustion. Her mother was sitting, eyes closed, enjoying the breeze. "Mother, your lunch," Nora said, placing the tray on the small table beside the bench. Her mother opened her eyes. "Ah, how wonderful! It smells delicious." Nora helped her mother eat, cutting the chicken into small pieces, bringing the fork to the old woman's mouth. It was an act of intimacy Nora had never shared with her mother, and every movement was torture. She felt like a puppet, her strings pulled by an invisible master. "It's very good, my daughter," her mother said, chewing slowly. "You are such a talented cook." Nora felt a knot in her throat. Talented. She had barely managed not to burn the eggs. Her mother's lie or ignorance was more painful than any criticism. As her mother ate, Nora observed the garden. The flowers, once symbols of her ostentation, now seemed to mock her. The sun continued to punish her, and time seemed to have stopped. The penance was real, tangible, and there was no escape. The Sheik had created a perfect prison, where the torture was psychological, the humiliation constant, and the only way out was complete submission. She felt a deep hatred for him, but also a paralyzing fear. He had promised she would learn her lesson, and Nora realized that the lesson was not just about serving, but about stripping herself of everything she believed herself to be. Lunch ended. Nora wiped her mother's mouth with a napkin, picked up the tray, and carried it back to the kitchen, ignoring the stares. The day was still far from over, and with each passing hour, the crown of thorns tightened further, digging deeper into her flesh and soul. The night, she knew, would bring only a brief respite before the torture resumed. The afternoon wore on, dragging like an endless penance. Nora remained by her mother's side in the garden, reading, conversing, describing the colors her mother couldn't see, the textures of the leaves she touched with childlike curiosity. Every word was an effort, every forced smile from Nora a stab at her wounded pride. Her mother, on the other hand, seemed to rejuvenate under the unexpected attention. Her smiles were more frequent, her questions more lively. She even hummed softly, an old melody Nora barely remembered hearing. "You know, Nora," her mother said, her voice soft as the breeze, "I never knew the garden was so vast. So many flowers, so many birds. It's a paradise you never bothered to show her." The Sheik's voice seemed to whisper in her mind. Guilt, a feeling Nora rarely experienced, began to gnaw at the edges of her resentment. But resentment was stronger, a wall she erected against the uncomfortable truth. As the sun began to dip to the west, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, her mother yawned. "I think I'm getting tired, my daughter. This day has been so full." Nora felt a momentary relief, quickly replaced by the realization that the work didn't end there. "Of course, Mother, let's go inside." With the same firm, but now exhausted hand, Nora guided her mother back through the corridors. The mansion, which once shone with the luxury she so loved, now seemed cold and empty. The servants, who once greeted her with deference, now watched her with a mixture of curiosity and, she imagined, satisfaction. In her mother's room, Nora helped her undress from the simple dress and put on a soft robe. Every movement was clumsy, every touch a reminder of the forced intimacy. She had never done this before, never cared. Her mother, however, accepted the help with silent gratitude, a small smile on her lips. "Are you thirsty, Mother? Or perhaps some tea?" Nora asked, her voice hoarse with fatigue. "Tea would be lovely, dear. And perhaps something light for dinner. I'm not very hungry after the delicious lunch you prepared." Nora nodded, the word delicious sounding like a cruel joke. She descended to the kitchen again, feeling the weight of the day in every muscle. The head cook watched her with the same impassive gaze. Does Madame Nora wish to prepare her mother's tea and dinner? "Yes," Nora replied, her voice almost a whisper. She prepared an herbal tea and a small bowl of light soup, with the same difficulty and embarrassment as before. The servants' gazes were like flames, burning her skin. She felt the urge to scream, to smash the dishes, to flee. But the image of the Sheik, standing by the fireplace, his impenetrable eyes, paralyzed her. Back in her mother's room, Nora helped her drink the tea and eat the soup. Her mother praised the soup, saying it was comforting and perfect. Nora merely nodded, unable to formulate a response. Her mind was numb with fatigue and humiliation. After dinner, Nora helped her mother lie down. She arranged the pillows, pulled up the blanket, and even smoothed her mother's grey hair, a gesture that surprised her as much as it did her mother. "Thank you, my daughter," her mother said, her voice already drowsy. "This was one of the most beautiful days I've had in a long time. You are so good." The word good echoed in the dark room, a stark contrast to the image Nora had of herself. She felt like an imposter, an actress in a cruel play. "Good night, Mother," Nora said, her voice choked. She turned off the light and left the room, closing the door softly. The corridor was dark and silent. Nora walked to her own room, feeling heavier than ever. She threw herself onto the bed, tears finally streaming down her face. The day had been an eternity of torture, each moment a reminder of her downfall. She was the dethroned queen, and the crown of thorns was now embedded so deeply in her flesh that it felt like a part of her. The Sheik had not reappeared since lunch, but his presence was a constant shadow, a reminder that he was watching, waiting. She hated him with an intensity she had never felt before. But fear was a poison that paralyzed her will. He had promised she would learn her lesson, and Nora realized with icy terror that the lesson was not just about serving, but about stripping herself of everything she believed herself to be. And the next day, she knew, would bring only more of the same. The night was merely a brief interlude before the penance resumed. Nora threw herself onto the bed, tears streaming down her face, but sleep did not come easily. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the Sheik's impassive face, his dark eyes piercing her soul. She relived the scornful glances, her mother's innocent praises, and the Sheik's relentless shadow. The room, once her sanctuary of luxury, now felt like a gilded cell, and the soft bed, a bed of thorns. She tossed and turned, the pillow soaked with tears and cold sweat. Hatred for the Sheik boiled in her veins, a bitter poison that prevented her from finding peace. How dared he? How could he do this to her? The dethroned queen, forced to serve, to humiliate herself before everyone. But hatred was accompanied by a paralyzing fear. He had promised she would learn, and Nora felt she was only at the beginning of her lesson. With each hour the tower clock chimed, the night seemed to stretch, and the prospect of dawn brought an icy terror. When the first rays of sun crept through the heavy curtains, Nora felt a pang of dread. The day had arrived, another day of penance, of humiliation, of servitude. She rose from the bed, her body aching, her eyes swollen and red. She looked at herself in the mirror, and the image she saw shocked her. The elegant and impeccable woman of before had vanished, replaced by a pale and disheveled figure with deep dark circles under her eyes. It was as if the beauty she so valued was crumbling under the weight of the ordeal. She took a quick shower, the cold water unable to wash away the feeling of dirt and shame that enveloped her. She put on one of the simple dresses the Sheik had provided, a dull, unadorned fabric, an antithesis to her previous wardrobe. Every piece of clothing was a reminder of her new reality. She descended the stairs, the mansion's silence still heavy. The kitchen was already in full swing, the smell of coffee and fresh bread hanging in the air. The head cook, with her stern gaze, watched Nora as she entered. "Good morning, Madam Nora," the cook said, her voice monotone. What would Madam like for her mother's breakfast? Nora felt her face burn again. "Coffee, toast, and perhaps some fruit," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. The cook nodded and indicated the ingredients. Nora, her hands still clumsy, began to prepare the coffee. The strong scent of coffee grounds was a reminder of her new task. She toasted the bread, spread the butter with difficulty, and arranged the fruit on a small plate. The gazes of the other maids were bolder now, some with an almost palpable curiosity, others with ill-concealed satisfaction. Nora felt naked, exposed, every mistake a spectacle. "Do you need help carrying the tray?" the cook asked, the false concern in her voice even more evident. "No," Nora replied, her voice firmer than she expected. She picked up the tray, the weight of the dishes and the coffee cup seeming overwhelming. She walked to her mother's room, who was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, her empty eyes fixed on some invisible point. "Good morning, Mother," Nora said, placing the tray on the bedside table. "Ah, good morning, my daughter. What a delicious smell. You are so thoughtful," her mother replied, a sweet smile on her lips. Nora felt the cruel irony of the word thoughtful again. She helped her mother sit up better, placed the coffee in front of her, and began cutting the toast into small pieces. Every movement was an act of submission, every touch a reminder of the forced intimacy. Her mother, oblivious to her daughter's internal torture, ate with appetite, praising each item. "This coffee is perfect, Nora, and the toast perfectly crisp. You have a talent for cooking I never imagined." Her mother's innocent lie was a more painful blow than any criticism. She felt like an imposter, an actress in a cruel play, and the Sheik's invisible audience was always watching. As her mother finished her coffee, Nora watched the sun streaming through the window. The day had only just begun, and the eternity of her penance stretched before her. The Sheik had not appeared, but his presence was a constant shadow, a reminder that he was watching, waiting. After coffee, Nora helped her mother get up and dress. Every button she fastened, every tie she tied, was a blow to her dignity. Her mother, with the docility of a child, allowed Nora to move her, dress her, tidy her up. "You are so gentle, my daughter," her mother murmured. The touch of her wrinkled hands on Nora's face, an electric shock. Nora recoiled instinctively, but her mother didn't notice. "How about a walk in the garden today? The air is so fresh." Nora swallowed hard. The garden, her private sanctuary, the place where she used to display her most expensive dresses and brightest jewels to her friends. Now she would traverse it as a servant, guiding her blind mother. "Of course, mother," she replied, her voice almost inaudible. Outside, the morning sun kissed the flowers and birdsong filled the air. The mansion, with its imposing walls, seemed to watch them. Nora guided her mother along the gravel paths, describing the flowers her mother couldn't see, the aromas she could smell. "They are roses, mother, your favorites. And the jasmine is in full bloom. The scent is intoxicating." Every word was an effort, a forced lie. She felt the gazes of the gardeners, of other passing servants, their conversations abruptly ceasing as they saw her. Humiliation was a heavy cloak that suffocated her. Her mother, however, radiated a simple joy. "Oh, how wonderful! I feel the warmth of the sun on my face. And the smell of the roses. It's as if I can see them." She squeezed Nora's hand. "This is a gift, my dear. A gift I didn't know I needed." The gift was Nora's torture. She felt a knot in her throat, a mixture of anger and a strange, almost imperceptible pang of something she couldn't identify. Compassion, guilt. She rejected it immediately. It was just fatigue. Back at the mansion for lunch, the scene repeated itself. Nora in the kitchen, the servant's eyes burning into her neck, the effort to prepare a simple meal. This time, grilled fish and steamed vegetables. Her mother praised every mouthful, every sip of water. "You are such a talented cook, Nora. Who would have thought?" With each compliment, Nora felt emptier. Her mother's lie. Her innocent gratitude was a cruel mirror reflecting Nora's monstrosity. She was not talented, not kind, not good. She was a sham, and the Sheik was forcing her to face that truth. The afternoon dragged on. Nora read to her mother, choosing a book of poetry her mother loved. Her voice, once melodious and confident, now sounded monotonous and exhausted. She could barely concentrate on the words, her mind wandering to her own suffering. Her mother fell asleep on the sofa, a peaceful smile on her face, while Nora continued to read to the silence of the room. When night fell, Nora was on the verge of collapse. Dinner, once again, was prepared and served by her. The routine, once carried out by a legion of servants, was now her solitary burden. Every dish washed, every towel folded, every glass filled was a reminder of the life she had lost. After helping her mother lie down, Nora dragged herself to her room. She didn't cry this time. The tears had dried, replaced by an icy void. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring into nothing. The Sheik had not appeared, but his lesson was being learned, painfully. She was being stripped, not just of her luxury, but of her very identity. The woman she was, the queen of her own cruelty, was unraveling layer by layer, and the icy terror she felt was not just of the Sheik, but of the woman she was becoming, or perhaps of the woman she was being forced to see she had always been. Dawn would bring more of the same, and Nora knew there was no escape. Penance was her new reality, and the end seemed a distant mirage. The night that followed was a succession of fragmented nightmares, where Nora relived the scornful glances, her mother's innocent praises, and the Sheik's relentless shadow. She awoke feeling as though she had slept only for minutes, her body even heavier, her mind clouded. The pale light of dawn filtered through the curtains, announcing yet another day of her new and cruel existence. She dragged herself out of bed, her muscles protesting with every movement. The mirror reflected an image she barely recognized: sunken eyes, lifeless hair, dull skin. The beauty that had been her armor and her weapon was unraveling, revealing a fragility she would never admit to possessing. The cold shower failed to awaken her spirit, only accentuating the feeling of emptiness. In the kitchen, the morning bustle seemed louder, the smells more intense. The head cook, with her silent, judging gaze, pointed to the eggs and bacon. "Your mother asked for scrambled eggs and bacon today, Madam Nora, and fresh orange juice." Nora felt a shiver of anger. Even her mother's wishes seemed a form of torture. With trembling hands, she cracked the eggs, the sound of the shell breaking echoing in her ears. The greasy smell of frying bacon nauseated her. She squeezed the oranges with almost violent force, imagining she was crushing her own life. The servants' gazes were now openly curious, some with contained smiles, others with a satisfaction Nora felt like stabs. "Here you are, Madam Nora," the cook said, handing her the tray. "Have a good day." The irony in her voice was almost unbearable. Nora carried the tray, its weight seeming unbearable, to her mother's room. Her mother was already sitting, head tilted, lips curved in an anticipatory smile. "Good morning, my flower. What a wonderful smell. Did you prepare everything for me?" Her mother's voice was a balm, but for Nora it was poison. "Yes, Mother," Nora replied, her voice hoarse. She placed the tray on the bedside table and began to serve. The scrambled eggs, the crispy bacon, the vibrant orange juice. Each item was a reminder of the luxury she had squandered, the cruelty she had inflicted. Her mother ate with delight, each mouthful accompanied by a compliment. "Oh, Nora, this bacon is perfect. And the eggs. You have a magic touch. I never imagined my daughter would be such a talented cook." Her mother's innocent lie was a more painful blow than any criticism. She felt like an imposter, an actress in a cruel play, and the Sheik's invisible audience was always watching. After breakfast, her mother expressed a wish. "Nora, dear, my hands are a little dry. Could you give me a massage with that cream I like so much? The lavender one." Nora felt a chill, massaging her mother's hands. The same hands she had ignored, that she had treated with indifference for years. Now she would have to touch them, feel them, care for them. It was a forced intimacy, a penance that went beyond the physical. She took the lavender cream and sat on the edge of the bed, taking her mother's wrinkled hands. The touch was strange, almost alien. Her mother's hands were soft, but marked by time, with prominent veins and age spots. Nora began to massage, her movements initially clumsy, then more fluid as the muscle memory of a distant time when she was a child and her mother pampered her, seemed to awaken. Her mother sighed with pleasure. "Ah, this is so good. My daughter, no one does it like you. I feel so much tenderness in your hands." The afternoon dragged on with more tasks. Nora helped her mother bathe, wash her long white hair and brush it gently. Every act of care was a punishment, a reminder of what she had neglected. Her mother, oblivious to her daughter's internal torture, spoke of old memories, of lullabies, of moments of tenderness Nora had erased from her mind. When night fell, Nora was exhausted, but the physical exhaustion was less than the emotional depletion. She prepared dinner, served her mother, and then helped her lie down. Back in her room, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring into nothing. The tears no longer came. There was only an emptiness, a feeling that she was being emptied of everything, even her very essence. The Sheik was breaking her, not with physical violence, but with a psychological cruelty that was far more devastating. She was a shell, and tomorrow would bring only more of the same, until nothing remained. The new dawn did not bring the oppressive grey of previous days, but a soft, golden light that filtered through the curtains. Nora awoke, not with the sharp ache of exhaustion, but with a strange lightness. The previous emptiness was still there, but now it seemed less an abyss and more a space, a silence that, for the first time, was not deafening. The seed, she realized, was not of fear, but of a cold, almost serene acceptance. In the kitchen, the air was imbued with the aroma of fresh bread. The head cook, with a gaze that seemed to carry a hint of something Nora couldn't decipher, perhaps respect, perhaps pity, pointed to a basket of herbs and a teapot. "Your mother asked for chamomile tea and some bread with red fruit jam today, Madam Nora, to start the day calmly." Nora nodded. There was no longer the simmering rage, nor the suffocating humiliation, only the acknowledgement of the task. She picked up the herbs, feeling the soft scent of chamomile on her fingers, and began to prepare the tea. Her movements were more fluid, less mechanical. As she spread the jam on the bread, an image of her mother, younger, preparing the same breakfast for her as a child, surfaced in her mind. This time, there was no stab of guilt, but a pang of melancholy, a silent acknowledgement of a lost time. Upon entering her mother's room, the blind woman's smile was a balm. "Good morning, my flower. I smell the bread and the chamomile. You prepared everything with such tenderness, didn't you?" Nora placed the tray on the bedside table. "Yes, mother." Her voice, though still low, did not tremble. She served the tea and bread, watching her mother eat with her usual delight. "Oh, Nora, this is so comforting. You always knew how to calm me." Her mother's words, once poison, were now just words. Nora no longer felt the need to reject them, nor to defend herself. There was only an acknowledgement of the truth in her mother's voice and of the lie in her own past. After breakfast, her mother expressed a wish. "Nora dear, the day is so beautiful. Could you take me to the garden? I want to feel the sun and hear the birdsong." Nora felt a shiver. The garden, the stage of her cruelty, where her mother had been exposed. She swallowed hard. "Yes, mother, let's go." She helped her mother to her feet, holding her arm with a firmness that was no longer forced. They walked slowly down the corridor, and as they passed the living room, Nora avoided looking at the corner where her mother had been. Furniture. Not out of fear, but out of a strange repulsion. In the garden, the sun was indeed a balm. Her mother sighed with pleasure, turning her face to the sky. "Ah, how wonderful! I smell the roses. Do you remember how I loved roses, Nora?" Nora nodded. "Yes, mother." And to her own surprise, a vivid image of her mother, younger, tending to the rose bushes, surfaced in her mind. A memory she thought she had erased. As her mother enjoyed the sun, Nora felt a pair of eyes on her. She turned her head slowly. There he was, the Sheik, standing on the veranda, observing her with an unreadable expression. He didn't approach, didn't say a word. He merely watched. Nora felt no anger, no fear, only a cold acknowledgement. He was there to witness the end. Her mother, oblivious to the Sheik's presence, extended her hand to Nora. "Nora, dear, could you describe the garden to me? The colors of the flowers, the movement of the leaves in the breeze? I want to see through your eyes." Nora looked at the Sheik. He was still watching her. She looked at her mother's outstretched hand, and then something broke. It wasn't an explosion of emotion, but a gentle collapse of the last defenses. The shell she was cracked, and the emptiness gave way to a strange clarity. "Yes, mother," Nora began, her voice low but firm. "The roses are in full bloom, red and yellow, and butterflies dance over them. The climbing jasmine is covering the arch, and the scent is sweet and intoxicating. The palm leaves sway gently with the breeze, and the sun is painting everything with a golden glow." She described every detail, every color, every shadow, with a precision she never knew she possessed. There was no longer the monotonous voice of before, but a soft, almost melodic cadence. Her mother smiled, absorbing every word, her blind eyes seeming to see the world through her daughter's voice. The Sheik, from the veranda, took a step forward. "Nora." His voice was calm, but laden with authority. Nora turned to him, without fear, without defiance, just present. "Do you understand now?" he asked, his eyes piercing. Nora looked at her mother, who was still smiling. Her face turned towards the sun. She looked at her own hands, which now seemed more hers than ever. I understand," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "I understand what I lost, and what I never had." The Sheik nodded slowly. "Cruelty is a mirror, Nora, and you spent your whole life refusing to look into it. Now you have no choice." He paused, his eyes fixed on hers. "Your penance is not a prison, but an opportunity. The opportunity to see, to feel, to care, to rebuild what you destroyed." Nora felt a solitary tear roll down her face, the first in days, perhaps in years. It wasn't from anger nor self-pity. It was a tear of recognition, of a deep pain, but also of a strange and terrifying hope. "And what will become of me?" she asked. Her voice choked. The Sheik looked at Nora's mother, then at the garden, and finally at Nora. "You will continue to serve, to care, to be your mother's eyes and hands. This mansion is now your sanctuary, and she, your only queen." Nora felt a shiver. The irony was brutal. She, the queen of cruelty, was now her own mother's servant, trapped in a cycle of forced care and devotion. Her reign of malice had ended, not with a scream, but with a whisper, with a tear. The seed had germinated, not into a flower of complete redemption, but into a twisted vine of penance and a new, painful purpose. She was not the woman she had been, nor the woman she feared becoming. She was something new, forged in pain and humiliation, and the path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time it was not empty. She was broken, yes, but perhaps, just perhaps, the Sheik was right. Perhaps by being forced to see, she could finally begin to truly perceive. And the icy terror she now felt was mixed with a pang of something more, something she still didn't dare to call hope, but which, deep in her soul, she knew was the beginning of a new and much harder journey